Mike John's Tech Us Out News. You know how we do it each and every week, bringing you the latest, hottest news in technology, hottest news in culture. And today we got a very special guest with us. This is Dr. Richard Jocoby. This is a bad brother right here. I'm talking about, he's on that future shit when we're talking about stem cell, and we're going to get into that a whole lot as it relates to tech, stem cell, the U.S. Oh boy, we're going to dive in. First up, thanks so much for being a guest here today. How you doing?
I'm doing excellent.
I love it, man. Before we begin this show, for our listeners, when you had said something pretty heavy, we're going to talk about this thing called sugar. And it's damn near in everything that we eat. It's hard to avoid it. You could be at Sprouts, you could be at Whole Foods thinking you're doing good, and sugar is still there, right?
Correct.
And there's the good and there's the bad, but there's a lot of bad that's out there on this thing called sugar. And so I was fascinated with this after looking at this book that you have, The Sugar Crush, How to Reduce Inflammation, Reverse Nerve Damage, and Reclaim Good Health. This is some powerful stuff you got going on.
We're trying.
Yes. So let's start with sugar, the word sugar. I remember backstage you had said something that I was like, what? Tell us about the root word, where the word came from, and why that's significant.
You know, I didn't know this until about 3 years ago. It's an Arabic word.
Right.
It's sukar. And when you really think about words...
Sukar?
Yeah.
Okay.
So when you think about words, they're describing something that never had existed before.
Okay.
So sugar goes back several centuries, and the Arabs had it in North Africa. They traded with Europeans, very expensive because it was very difficult to cultivate. Everybody was trying to figure out where it came from. And the Portuguese had been to Puerto Rico 50 years before Columbus. And they had maps, and Columbus got a hold of those maps. Mm-hmm. And he went to Queen Isabella in Birmingham in Spain and said, I got a deal for you. Here are the maps, you put up the money, and here we are. Because sugar runs the world, basically. It created the United States of America. That's what the value, the wealth of this nation was on, the production of sugar and alcohol and all those things that derive from it. And here we are. So what created the country is destroying the country. And that's what the book Sugar Crush is about.
But, now, diving in, since we're all about tech and, again, this thing called sugar, you told me something shocking, and I want our audience to know about the relationship between our smartphone, the technology that it kicks out called microwave,
right?
And when people are on their phones and they happen to be eating sweets. What's the correlationship there?
Well, sugar plus trauma equals nerve dysfunction. So a cell phone basically is a microwave oven. So originally it was 2G, maybe a mile long from antenna to antenna, then 3G, 4G, and now we're down to a microwave oven. So when you put this microwave oven to your ear and you're eating lots of sugar, the sugar gets inside the nerve by a chemical reaction, and it's called the polyol pathway. So it gets inside, and there's another pathway called the Maillard reaction, and that causes the soft tissue to contract. When you add heat in the form of a microwave, you're going to cause extreme amount of calcium to be discharged from your nerve. And this is a fundamental problem.
What the?
I know. And so we're going to talk about, in our new book, Unglued, how to get unglued safely, not only for this device, but for everything. Everything that we think of as disease is really a manifestation of sugar in its biochemistry.
So with the relationship between your smartphone, 5G, and sugar, you're saying that this is what can lead, obviously, to cancer.
Yes.
Now, the government, all that, I mean, are they aware of this? Because I don't want to be on no conspiracy-like theory.
Well, there are aliens out there. You know that.
I know about the reptiles, the lizard people, but I don't know about the aliens. Are they different?
So conspiracies usually have an element of truth. And in this case, that element of truth is rather large.
Right.
Dr. Martin Pall, P-A-L-L, and you can look him up, he testified before the U.S. Senate on this very subject about 10 years ago, warning them of the dangers of EMF, electromagnetic fields. And he has a book called Unexplained Diseases. And that's where I got that information. I know him personally. He came to my seminar. He is very, very good in biochemistry. But this was 10 years ago when it was 2G. So people are like, well, it's not going to be a big deal. Well, it is a big deal. A very big deal.
So, with that being said, and we're talking about sugar here, fruits. I'm always eating fruits, and I'm just curious. You know, they do contain sugar. Is that a good sugar? And let's tell the truth. Is there a good sugar?
No.
There's no type of good sugar.
Well, the human body.
Brown sugar isn't good.
No, it's all marketing, like steel cut oatmeal. Oh, if you cut it with a steel knife, somehow it's magically good. Still sugar. It's carbohydrates. Any carbohydrate breaks down to a simple sugar. So, what is a sugar? Why do we need it? Well, we need glucose, yes, to operate our body to a certain extent. Only 1 teaspoon. That's it, at any one time. Anything above that is toxic.
Right.
So, fruit is fructose. So that's a different sugar. So when I was training back in Philadelphia many years ago, they said, no, sugar is a sugar is a sugar, and that's not true. Fructose goes through your liver, and it turns off a switch called leptin, which is like your I'm full switch. And you're never full. You're never satisfied with the food we're eating and processed food because it's laced with fructose. Fructose is sweet. Glucose is not. So when you combine the two together, you have sucrose, the table sugar.
Right.
And they put the fructose in, otherwise you wouldn't eat it.
Right.
And that's how they trick you. Sugar is good, fat is bad hypothesis. Started in the late 60s by a guy by the name of Ansel Keys, got his face on the front of Time magazine, in the 7-country study. Why was it 7 country when it was 22? He cooked the books. Big Pharma got involved. We're going to lower cholesterol because that's what's causing cardiovascular disease. No, it's not. Sugar causes cardiovascular disease. It's shocking what we have been educated into ignorance, as I say. And our medical profession is just repeating that same lie for the last 60 years.
I want to take a shot of tequila in a second, man. That's some heavy stuff. Real heavy stuff. You know, what, for our listeners and everything, and our audience, what makes you the expert? You started, and I got to say this first, you started in the game in 1967.
Be kind now. Be kind.
No, that makes you a master don, doctor. You started in performing surgery. I want to be clear. In 1967 is when you first began performing surgery. We're about to kick off 2023. You've been at this. I got to ask first, how many, still looking good and everything, how many surgeries have you done since 2022?
Probably around 10,000.
10,000, just opening up the human body.
Yeah, in my field.
Gotta take a shot. I need shit. We need I gotta take this shot down here. We're gonna be cracking open this in a minute, trust me. Go ahead, your field, talk to me.
Well, when I trained back in that day, it's hard for me to say it out loud, it was so long ago. A lot of people, when they say...
You're looking good, man.
Well, thank you, I appreciate that. A lot of people say, I saw you back in 1970-something. I said, no, that was my father. No, it was really me. But I got involved with the diabetes thing because of, I was asked by Dr. Luke Chu in 1981. He is the Surgeon General of Taiwan.
Yes.
And he was head of the National Defense Medical Center. He owned Mingwei Trading Company. I had a lot of patents back in those days of regular surgery. And he had asked me to come over and figure out why they had diabetes in China, in Taipei. I got there and I said, first thing I said to him, what's the word in Mandarin for sugar? Because I like words, and what do they mean? He goes, well, it's diabetes. I know, that's a Greek word. What do you call it? He said, well, we call diabetes mellitus, which means in Greek, to siphon out sugary water in your urine. That's basically what it means. In the old days, when somebody urinated, the bees went around the urine and they knew that there was sugar in the urine. That's how they made the diagnosis.